Well, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said this morning the U.S. will send more than $1 billion in new aid to Ukraine. He's in London for the Ukraine Recovery Conference, where President Zelensky appeared virtually. This comes amid fierce battles on the front lines. And yesterday, Russian media outlets reported 2 drones were brought down outside of Moscow. No casualties were reported. Joining me now from the Ukraine Recovery Conference in London is BBC News diplomatic correspondent James Landale. Thanks for joining us, James. So first off, let's talk about what this meeting is all about. It seems, I guess you have to start planning for what happens after the war, even though clearly the war is nowhere close to its conclusion. What are leaders hoping to achieve with this meeting?
There are 2 very clear objectives here. One is to send a very clear signal to Moscow that the Western allies, the United States and Europe and others are absolutely committed to Ukraine's long-term economic future. In other words, it's not just about military support. There'll be more talk about that at the NATO summit next month. This is all about long-term economic support. That's one objective. The other objective is actually to say, look, let's try and start the process of reconstructing Ukraine now. It's too late if we wait till the end of the conflict. And it's difficult because there are sticking points. There are things like, how do you unuse Russian money that's been frozen, reserved from the banks? How do you get private sector companies to invest in a country that is war-torn and has a huge reputation for corruption? So those are the detailed issues that they're trying to hammer out at the conference behind me today.
It's very interesting as we cover the war from here. One day we will talk to a correspondent and they will be standing in the middle of a devastated community close to the front lines. And then other times, they're in a bustling city and you're struck by how there is a new normal going on in Ukraine, depending on where you are. You have recently been in Ukraine. What is the state of the country's economy at this point?
Well, you're absolutely right. There are parts of Ukraine that are war-ravaged, that are polluted by ammunition and by destruction. But it's a massive country, and there are large parts of the country where the economy is relatively normal. It's relatively peaceful. If you go to major cities during the daytime, you will see people wandering about, doing their business. The bars are full, the restaurants are full, people going about their business. So the aim is to try and invest in those safer places while the war continues. But it does matter because although there are parts of the economy that are back on track, so for example, after all the devastation on the energy side of things in Ukraine, we heard this morning that Ukraine is now back exporting electricity to other countries outside of its borders. But its agriculture sector, for example, is still really, really struggling. So that's where they're trying to get more investment, as well as the reconstruction process.
And, one thing that we've learned, James, is that, Ukraine may be, not the largest country in the world, but when you talk about energy, when you talk about agriculture, the ripple effects throughout the rest of the world have been quite profound. And so just another reason why Ukraine's economy needs to get back on track. James Landale, thank you very much.